Hi guys, my name's Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Well, this next week is Halloween, so I thought it would be fun to paint this little black cat right here. And we're gonna paint it on black watercolor paper. That's right, black watercolor paper, which seems like it wouldn't make a ton of sense because watercolor is so transparent and you can see right through it. But if you use metallic or iridescent paints like we're gonna do, it works out perfectly. So let's do this. Here are the materials that we have for today. This is Stonehenge Aqua cold pressed black paper. It is 100% cotton and 140 pounds. It is Legion and it's on a pad, and I wish that it was on a block because when you tape the edges of this paper, it is so fragile that it rips an entire layer off of the surface of the paper when you tape it down. So be aware of that. You definitely want to tape outside of the area of your picture plane. I also wouldn't use masking fluid on it unless you absolutely have to, because it does the same thing. It rips a layer off. But I mean, that seems to be par for the course for most black watercolor papers. I've tried the three major ones, which is this Stonehenge and Van Gogh and Schizen. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but I've tried all of them and I do think that this is the best out of those, although the Van Gogh one is pretty good. The Schizen one, I couldn't get it to hold any color very well, so I would call this one probably the best out of those. We are using Paul Rubens metallic and watercolors. That is the 24 set, and they really do a pretty good job at showing up on black watercolor paper. This is what they look like. I would swatch that out if I were you to be able to see what the colors actually look like on black. This is what they look like on white. It's not quite as obvious of a metallic effect, but they work pretty well from what I've used them for. So this is another palette that I'm going to be using one color out of. This is the Winsor Newton Cotman set. It has kind of your basic metallics like golds and coppers and pewter and things like that, but I'm going to be using the copper out of this one. It works pretty well too. I would do the same thing and swatch that as well. This is a Sakura Gelly Pen, white pen for some details later. This is a number 0 round and a number 6 round. I'm starting on the eyes and I'm going for Deep Interference Orange from the Paul Rubens set. So I'm starting out with a mix that has a lot of water in it, and that is going to be for the shadow parts. And then you can see I'm adding more and more of the pigment closer to the middle of the eye. That's going to be the lighter area of this, or the more intense part. And I'm painting around his pupil because it needs to stay black and you can't really use masking fluid on this, so I'm painting around it. But the outer edges of the eye are more in shadow, so I'm using more water towards the edge. It's all about using this black paper to your advantage. Normally you would put more and more pigment in the shadow areas to get it darker and darker. In this case, you use more and more water in the shadow areas to get it less and less pigment, especially for these metallic colors. That way more of the black can show through and it looks darker. And then in the areas such as the highlights, you just add more and more pigment on top of that. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit and come back to it later. But in the meantime, I'm going to grab some Symphony blue and begin working on the fur part of the cat. Blue is a fun color to use on a black animal anyway, but especially since I've used orange for his eyes and it's the complementary color of orange, plus it's Halloween, we're just going to make this a little bit extra spooky with this blue. So some of the most intense part of light on this cat is actually right here on the top of his head, so I'm making sure and using a lot of pigment there, and then I water it down as it comes towards the center of his face because more of that is in shadow. I really want it to look like she's lurking in the deep dark shadows here, so I've intensified the contrast and made the darks basically black. And I'm achieving that by adding more and more water in the dark areas and really just leaving the black of the paper for some areas. I want you to be able to tell it's a cat, but I don't want you to see every little detail because it needs to be like the light is just barely hitting her. Sorry about my hand being in the way here. Normally I would turn the page in order to get the brush strokes going the direction that I want to. I can't really do that though when I'm filming, so I apologize. The parts in the center of the face here, I'm really just barely using any pigment at all. It is mostly water, and I'm just doing that to make sure these shadows are dark enough, and she's just barely coming out into the light. I keep saying she, and that's probably because I had a black cat many, many years ago, and she was the literal sweetest cat ever, which is kind of funny that they're supposed to be these spooky cats, but I mean, you know, whatever. Try to make sure that you are suggesting fur here rather than painting in each stroke of hair, because that can get to be just a little bit overdone. Normally, I would be using a lot more variety in color and mixing colors to get the colors that I want, stuff like that. But I really find that these metallic ones are just much easier to use straight out of the pan. When it comes to the body, I definitely just want a very, very slight suggestion that she's even there. I mean, I'm really just outlining the edge and then using a bunch of water to blend it down, and then the rest of it's just the black paper showing through. Now I'm picking up some of this red copper from the Cotman set, and I'm adding that into the area of the ears where you can kind of see through it from behind. Since it's such a low light situation, you probably wouldn't actually see this, but I thought it would make some nice variation. I'm adding a little bit of that red copper into the eyes too, and it's really just because I think it looks a little spookier that way to add a little bit of a red tone into her eyes. Now I'm going to mix pink and wine red together in order to do the tongue here, and it's going to be a little pinker on the edge and it's going to be a little bit more wine red in the middle. So I outline the tongue with the more pink of the colors, and then I start adding in some of the more wine red of the colors. That's more towards the center, and then I add a whole bunch of water in the middle to shadow that out. And how hilarious does this look without the fangs and just her tongue hanging out? Then I add a little bit more of that wine red on the inner parts of her mouth and gums. Then I come back up to right under her nose and add a little bit more of the blue. And then I add a bit of the hair on her chinny chin chin. Sorry, I had to. My red copper faded a little bit in the eyes, so I'm adding a little bit more pigment in. And I guess we can't leave her tongue sticking out like this, so we're going to add the fangs. So we're using Pearl Silver White from the Paul Rubens set, and I'm just adding that in. First I'm using a very watery mix, and then I'm adding some pretty much straight pigment right to the end of the fangs to make them stand out more. And then of course you have to add in all her other tiny little teeth. Now I'm using some more of that pearl silver white, and I am adding in the highlights of the eyes so that they look wet. At this point, I'm just adding details here and there. A lot of it is really just to cover up the pencil lines that I can still see, which annoys me. So I'm covering up the pencil lines right here, especially on the ears. I really should say that I don't normally get into Halloween very much. I'm not into spooky stuff. I'm not into scary stuff even. I do take my daughter trick-or-treating, and that's about it. I really just thought it was kind of fun, thought you might enjoy it, and thought it was a great opportunity to show you how to use black paper with metallic watercolor. Now I have my Sakura Gelly Gel Pen, and I am just adding in these little whiskers. Try to do it as quickly as you can, otherwise it'll look a little bit forced. I thought I would actually show you really quick what this paper does with tape. So you can see here that really it just takes an entire layer of that black paper off of this, and you really just need to be aware of that. Every brand I've tried does the exact same thing. And here's the finished product, all dried and with the tape removed, and you can definitely see where that tape was. And there you have it, a lovely little black cat for the spooky season. And now, as a bonus, you know how to deal with black watercolor paper, so have some fun with it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that fun stuff, because that is how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.